ladies and gentlemen, this is Why Was Texas Divided After It Joined the USA? By channel History Matters. Yes, this is another History Matters video. It's been a while, right? I don't know when I did the last one, but yeah. History Matters. So I guess Texas, I think, first became independent from Mexico, if I remember correctly, right? Then Texas was its own country or something like that, and then later on Texas was annexed into USA by mutual agreement or something. And I'm pretty sure USA also gave some kind of a money to Mexico, and some debt was I guess cleared or something like that, right? So yeah, so Texas was first its own. Was it called Texas? Right, it was called Texas, something like that, which is kind of interesting because that's not what I thought the first time. Like Texas is so like. I always assumed like Texas joined USA very early, right? Like when USA formed. But no, later on I find out like most of the eastern part was the Union, or the newer found country, and then they slowly acquired land going by west. So yeah, that is something. So, and also Texas is the country right now that is like the most one with the border issue or something, right? Which is kind of interesting considering the history. But yeah, let's go this one. Remember, people, if you like my Rickson, don't forget to subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more. Check out the Rickson did. There's a link in the description. Yeah, let's watch it. 50% larger than it was today. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that's the video. What? Texas is different today when the originally it was? Huh, it's going to be interesting. Let's watch it.
As many of you will know, when Texas joined the United States, it looked like this. However, a mere 5 years later, it had lost all of these lands, which nowadays form parts of New Mexico, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and even Wyoming. This massive loss of land raises an obvious question: why? Why did Texas lose all this territory, and why did the Texans agree to it? So, in 1836, Texas won its independence from Mexico after a short war. Mexico didn't really accept this independence, but there was little they could do about returning Texas to the fold given all of the unofficial help that the United States had given it during the war. The brand new Republic of Texas claimed all of this territory, but only really had firm control over this. That doesn't mean Mexico controlled it. In fact, most of it was controlled by the Comanche tribe, but nobody recognized their claim to anything. So after about a decade of politically ignoring...
Yeah, recognition is only by the victors, apparently, if you really go back in history. That's what the case was. All the native tribes, like, okay, they owned it, but nobody cares, because who's going to recognize it? The powers, basically. Most of European countries or not, right? So struggle between them, oh, okay. So, okay, that makes sense. If US kind of helped in the background, helped Texas, I can see in later on, like, I'm the one who helped you. And Texas might be thinking like, what if US suddenly decides not to help now and Mexico comes back? So that's why they joined US or something.
In Texas, the US annexed it as a state. The overlapping claims of the US's newest member and Mexico soon led to the Mexican-American War, which ended with the US victory and Mexico losing all of this. So after winning a war for Texas's disputed territory...
Didn't they pay money? I think US paid money to Mexico, right? Certain millions, if I remember correctly.
It would be fair to assume that Texas would be given its claimed lands, but fun fact, no. Instead, the federal government argued that the Texan claim wasn't that strong, and that even though the land definitely wasn't Mexican anymore, it also wasn't Texan. The concern was that this new state was far too large and thus would wield too much power in the future. And Makes sense. As part of a broader discussion on how to incorporate America's new land, several prominent senators put forward proposals on how to divide Texas. The first idea was that of Missouri Senator Thomas Benton, who proposed that Texas be divided like this, with the North and West going to the federal government as part of the territory of New Mexico, and the rest being divided into two states, Texas and Colorado. This plan was much more about being divided into two states, Texas and Colorado.
What? That's a very small portion of what it was like. That's small.
This plan was much more about keeping the free state-slave state balance in the Union, but it was also unpopular with the Texans. Furthermore, it broke the rule of splitting states. The next plan was put forward by Senator Henry Foote, who pushed for Texas to simply be divided into two states, Texas and the brand new state of Jacinto. This went nowhere because, again, no splitting states. And if the Texans didn't like those plans, they really weren't going to like that of Senator John Bell. This would see this territory handed to New Mexico and Texas divided into two new states. The land east of the Trinity River would be the state of Texas, and the rest of the land would become the Colorado Territory. That was until its population got large enough that it could be split into two new states, which Bell wanted to call Colorado and Washington. This proposal wasn't even considered by the Texans. Thus, the US government needed to make sure that Texas kept much more of its territory, and two ideas were put forward. The first was by Henry Clay, who just did this, giving this land to New Mexico. This was rejected because it meant that this tiny piece of land here would be ceded from New Mexico to Texas, which meant opening a whole new can of worms.
Wait a minute, so splitting of state can only mean if you create a new state. If you give a land to some other state, I guess it's not splitting. Is that it? Kind of makes sense. Look, pretty sure Texans and Texas government and USA came to a mutual agreement when they got annexed to USA, right? I'm pretty sure that's what I remember. So obviously at that time, if USA makes certain demands, like you can't be this big of a state if you want the same type of rights as USA does, right? So at that point, like they have to yeah, okay, that makes sense. If you're going to be part of this, yeah, this has to make sense. So obviously they have to give in some of this, but seriously, man, that's so fucked up. Like Texas was so big. Imagine that today. Like Texas is big now. There are certain things that Texans boast is kind of true because how big of a state it is. And nowadays, after people leaving California and going for the Texas, that's becoming a thing apparently. Texas is becoming even larger and larger. But imagine if you had that much land, like stretching through all the three states. Texas would have been way too big. But then again, that's the whole point. It wouldn't have been because they wouldn't have let them. Right? If it becomes too, already there's like state warfare with each other in the US is too strong, right? Because it's like united, it's barely joined together. All the states act as their own country or something like that. So yeah, it wouldn't ever have been that big in the first place.
Worms, and thus no. In the end, it was Senator James Pierce that settled the issue. He put forward this border, which took this from Texas and gave it to the federal government. This was acceptable to Congress because it didn't require splitting the state of Texas, so long as you considered this to be Texas and this to be extra territory that just happened to belong to Texas. So why did the Texans agree to this when initially they just wanted to keep all of their land? Well, the answer was money. Texas has racked up a lot of debt from its independence war, and the federal government promised to take on that debt in return for Texas being carved up. Another reason was that whilst Texas did claim all of this, it never really held on to it. And so what it was given was still seen as extra and still made Texas the largest state in the Union. Yeah. As such, both sides were mostly happy and Texas took on the shape that it has to this day. I hope you enjoyed this episode with a special thanks to my patrons, James Bisonet, Kelly Moneymaker, Korsho.
I like how USA even then had enough money to basically buy shit out. All right, you have debt. How about I clear some of the debt? Like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Money, yeah, money. Money solves everything apparently. This makes sense a lot because Texas was their own country, then all this struggle, and I'm pretty sure there was a little, very recent, this historical wise, that they also want to become their own country or something again, right? Some referendum or something, and then recent poll told us like it's just barely single-digit percentage of people want to be their own country. Why would you want to leave USA? It doesn't matter how much problem you have, you're still at the top, right? People want to be their own country, kind of makes sense, but there's a limit to it. If you're literally the number one country, there's lots of luxuries that you have because of it. There's no point of leaving it. Then what you're going to do, right? I get it. Texas has, a lot of economy and everything, a lot of GDP, but it doesn't matter. The USA as whole is really big. But yeah. Why was Texas divided after it joined the USA by channel history? Because it was never Texas in the first place. So whatever they got, still more than they originally had, apparently. This is why the channel History Matters. If you like what I subscribe, and I'll see you next time.